This is episode 252 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by one of our own, Patrick Brenner. He is the Director of Giving at the Rio Grande Foundation. Welcome back to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Patrick.
Thank you for having me on board, Paul. I appreciate it. It's been about a year since I've been on last.
Yeah, well, this is kind of our annual tune-up, check-in, a little bit of year in review, but also giving. It's Giving Monday, right? That's coming up.
It's Giving Tuesday.
Giving Tuesday.
So, as the foundation's fundraising director, I think everybody watching can expect how this conversation is going to end.
Oh, well, we will certainly talk a lot about the Rio Grande Foundation and why everybody should support it. But that is, we're not going to be so heavy-handed as that. We are going to review some of the accomplishments, challenges the organization faced over the last year. And, at the start, I'll give my brief overview. Obviously, it was not a spectacular year for personal freedom in the state of New Mexico. We're kind of like the Cincinnati Bengals of personal freedom here in the land of enchantment. It's a very tough place to get a lot accomplished. Rio Grande Foundation definitely does a lot with a little, but when we have elections, we tend to, as a state, elect people that like big government, want to spend other people's money, and want to restrict and regulate and rule over New Mexico. And obviously, 2020 has been dominated by the COVID-19 situation, and that colors a lot of what we've done and not done over the last year in terms of our events. But, you've done a lot of great work for us, including really enhancing our image, literally image, not in the sense that we had a bad image, but the images that we put out, the graphics, you do great work on that. So thank you for that. But, kind of looking at it from your perspective, the year and the Rio Grande Foundation in it, what is Patrick's take?
I think that we have been more exposed now, in a good way, than we have ever been. I know that we had some additional budget that we were able to allocate toward direct mail, and we did a ton, probably quite literally a ton of direct mail marketing throughout the election. We hit over 200,000 pieces. Well, not hit, but we sent out 200,000 pieces of direct mail. And that's my specialty, and that's why I came to be on board, is my experience with printing and marketing and all the direct mail. So that's huge for us to have sent over 200,000 pieces of direct mail in a single election cycle. I don't think we've ever done anything like that before.
No, that is definitely something that's unique and new this year, and hopefully it's something that we can continue and improve upon. And your connections in the mail house industry are certainly a critical part of that, as well as your knowledge of graphic design software and ability to put those together. It wasn't just inexpensive, which I like, but it was also attractive, which people receiving those like.
Sure. And that's how I came to be on board. My experience is graphic design work, data, direct mail, print stuff. I was in the print industry for a long time before I came on board, and it eventually just made sense to cut out the middleman, which I think everybody appreciated and allows us to stretch our dollar probably twice as far as we would be able to otherwise.
Yeah, one of the things that you've also brought to the table is knowledge of open records laws and the ability and willingness to tangle with some of those folks. And we'll get into that in a minute. But kind of going chronologically through the year, actually, the first major event of every year, practically for Rio Grande Foundation and most public policy outfits here in New Mexico, involves the legislative session. 2020's was a 30-day session. It was pre-COVID. It feels like ancient history now, going into that roundhouse where everybody's tightly packed and discussing the issues. And we track that the activities in that building with our Freedom Index, and we are re-upping for another year. So, folks, stay tuned. 60-day session. We will be watching that very closely. Of course, how that session looks is going to be very different, and how it works is going to be open to question at this point. But we looked at some of the worst bills, and I know Patrick's brought an interest in gun rights issues to the foundation. There were some really atrocious anti-gun bills. SB 5, we labeled it the worst of the session in our Freedom Index, gave it a -7 rating out of possible -8. HB 364, it was a public employee union giveaway that they refused to let die, even though it died under a different number previously in the session. Then there was the HB 83. Again, like ancient history, it created a $320 million fund for early childhood. Remember when we had that surplus? We just didn't know what to do with it. That was in the year 2020. And that surplus money going into that early childhood account, it was not touched despite all of the budgetary challenges we faced this year and will face in the year ahead. So those bills all passed, unfortunately. The one good news out of the session, news item, was SB 72. It changed and put our Public Employee Retirement Association para pension system on a closer to full funding situation. Rio Grande Foundation was very involved in all of that, and it was a tough session. Although most of the really bad things under Lujan Grisham in the legislative sessions have happened, they happened in 2019. 2020 was a little bit of a step back, and it'll be interesting to see what 2021 has in store. But Patrick, talk about open records, open meetings, and some of the activities that we engaged in, because that was kind of the next big battle that we started on in the 2020 year.
Well, a lot of the open records action that we take tends to involve litigation, and I don't know if that's my fault and that I am too abrasive and that they immediately put up a defensive front, which results in us having to engage with them in the courts rather than some other amicable way.
I don't think so. Just defending you for a second, I'll say that first and foremost, the Public Records Act in New Mexico is decent, but they always interpret in ways to benefit themselves in keeping records, and that has only been amplified during the COVID-19 situation. And it's a frustrating group to deal with, and there's really no direct ramifications for them in their budgets when they don't obey the law. So, all that being said, please continue.
Sure. Well, you're right, and I think that there's some colorful interpretation that tends to favor delayed responses. Although in the end, I tend to get what I asked for to begin with. It just takes some time. So that being said, we had a couple of open records requests that dated back to 2019. One involved the Bernalillo County sick leave from summer of 2019. We were working with the Albuquerque Coalition for a Healthy Economy. We had an intern. His name was Will Harris. He submitted an IPRA request on our behalf for all of the emails and other correspondence that was sent by constituents to the Bernalillo County Commission. They were playing hardball and refused to give up the records as politely as I asked. And we ended up soliciting the assistance of attorney Blair Dunn here in Albuquerque. And he was instrumental in getting us some court time. We took the matter to court, and a decision had been made by the judge sort of in our favor and sort of not in our favor. And sort of the opposite of what we expected also. We first one on the issue of timeliness, which is very important. The Bernalillo County Commission took, oh boy, it was a long time. It was in the three digits, like over 100 days in delays. And the judge ruled in our favor that anything beyond 90 days is excessive on this specific case, which is good. This is good case law to have on the books. However, he cited against us on another issue involving individual privacy. When a private citizen sends an email to a county commission or a public body regarding something that is public, that individual has no expectation for privacy unless it contains the document that they sent or whatever record that was created as a result of sending this communication contains something like a social security number or a date of birth. Those are exemptions under the Inspection of Public Records Act, and the public body responsible for maintaining those records, has an obligation to not provide those, is my understanding of the Inspection of Public Records Act. So if a constituent sends their date of birth, they redact it and they give us the rest. However, an email does not fall under a unique personal identifier. And what the County of Bernalillo did is they redacted all the email addresses of the people that were not in favor of the people that were in favor of the sick leave mandate. So they redacted all the information of the people that they wanted to protect, and then they disclosed the information, the email addresses of the people that they didn't care about or that they sought to harm in some way. I allege that. So we got these records, and the judge looked at them and said, well, you took too long, but the redactions were valid. And we're asking the judge to reconsider his ruling specifically regarding the redactions. But we do applaud the judge ruling in our favor as far as timeliness goes, because that's a question that IPRA doesn't really address.
One's ongoing, right?
Correct.
Sort of,
We filed a motion for reconsideration of the judge, because we'd rather give him the opportunity to reverse his own decision than going to the appellate court and asking them to reverse it, because we might not get what we want in the appellate court system.
Now, in terms of additional, and we fought a lot this year for open records and open processes. Early on, as COVID was getting kicked off, the city of Albuquerque City Council was meeting behind closed doors in order to give Mayor Keller emergency powers. This, we believed, and not only we, but Pete Dinelli, who's a pretty staunch Democrat, had discussed it with folks, including myself, and said that we had a very strong leg to stand on. Again, the judiciary throughout the COVID situation has been extraordinarily deferential to political leadership in Santa Fe. But when it comes to open government, unfortunately, that was denied. Now, we were not a party to the Republican suit against the state on opening up the legislative process as well. And that was for a special session. Remember, the general session had already been completed. The 30 days was gone by the time COVID was getting going. But now we're in the 60-day session mode, and we will be considering, I'm sure several folks will be as well, whether there's a legal challenge still on that issue. Because, again, as I've said to anyone who will listen, having a agenda preset special session for 2 or 3 days in the summer is a much different animal than having an open 60-day session of the citizens' legislature and doing that without the citizens there. So just a warning to all the folks out there that we will be exploring all of our legal options as this session approaches. So Patrick, I know you had some more to say about open records and open government and your work on the foundation's behalf.
Sure. Well, we did engage immediately regarding the city of Albuquerque.
Right.
Unfortunately, our efforts were not successful, and we had a negative ruling or what we found to be negative by Judge Franchini here in Albuquerque.
Right.
I don't approve, but so goes. We engaged immediately with the city of Albuquerque. They were trying to have some open meetings that were not open, and we thought were in violation of the Open Meetings Act specifically, and litigated immediately, which is something that I appreciate about the foundation, is that we're nimble and we're able to react quickly to some of these things. So we filed a motion to stop any activity or any rulemaking or any ordinance passage as a result of this meeting. And they call that an emergency petition for a temporary restraining order
Yep.
and the preliminary injunction, which we were not successful in achieving those goals, and ultimately the case was dismissed. But that's not for lack of trying. Outside of the city of Albuquerque's what we considered the violation of the Open Meetings Act, we had some still ongoing litigation regarding democracy dollars. I don't know if y'all remember democracy dollars, but that was a special issue that the voters declined to adopt in November of 2019. Now, we wanted to find out exactly what was going on behind the city of Albuquerque's usage of their own website and Mayor Keller's usage of the city's website to advocate for passage of democracy dollars. We know now that the city of Albuquerque was definitely not supposed to be using their own website to advocate for passage of an issue like that, or the general obligation bonds that Mayor Keller also advocated for passage of. Those passed, unfortunately. But as far as democracy dollars goes, we wanted to find out more about the behind the scenes of what was going on with the usage of the city website. We're still involved in that. The acting city clerk, Ethan Watson, is playing hardball with me, and we still have some arguments pending in court, so I'm not going to speak any more about that. But we're still engaged, and this stuff takes time. I mean, the request was filed on December 20th, 2019. We still don't have all of the documentation that we requested. I asked for text messages, and they still haven't given them to us, any of them. And they haven't even acknowledged the fact that I requested that they not delete any of the text messages that I requested. So as far as I know, they've deleted these records, and they're not going to be providing them because now they no longer are in possession of them, despite my staunch advocacy for protecting these from deletion.
Yeah, democracy dollars. That was another narrow election victory for the Voices of Sanity. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but sick leave was one of those as well that we were involved in a few years back in the city of Albuquerque, a ballot measure that failed narrowly, and democracy dollars would have created this really bizarre campaign financing system at the city of Albuquerque with people getting vouchers, and who knows who those people would be because they weren't necessarily going to be registered voters in Albuquerque, et cetera, et cetera. And thankfully, a narrow majority of the voters saw fit to kill that thing. But there was reason for us to want to know more about the details behind that issue, and that one's still pending as well. Speaking of open government, and again, this is as COVID was kicking off in April, we co-created, the Rio Grande Foundation did, and Patrick, you actually created the website, but it's called fairlyopen.com. At this point in the COVID game, it's a little bit dated in the sense that we hope that there is more and better information about the virus out there than we had back in April, but it still seems, from Michelle Lujan Grisham, our governor, and we're not going to go into a detailed critique in this podcast, that she's still doing the same kind of thing that she was when this started off in March. And we called for a fairly open process. Fair, as in fair to all concerned, treated all business the same. Certainly is not the case in the last one or this lockdown. And an open process. And that meant opening the process up to science so all of us can kind of see what the decisions are and how they're being made. This has been a disaster, in my opinion, for the state of New Mexico, for the people of New Mexico, and not just in the area of COVID and its treatments or even the economy, but just having one person in charge of all aspects of New Mexico government for what's now getting on to 3/4 of a year is a total disaster. And, I know, Patrick, we talk quite a bit around the office and whenever about the issues, but, your interpretation, your thoughts on Fairly Open and just this whole process that we've been living under.
Pretty sure that goes back to elementary school when we were talking about the three branches of government and checks and balances. That is elementary, my dear Watson.
Yeah.
And she is certainly not behaving within those rules that I was taught growing up.
Yeah, and getting back to your point about RGF being a nimble organization, if most organizations put some kind of annual, like, we're going to do this year coming up in writing, and we have an idea what we're going to be working on and what we're not going to be working on. Unfortunately, in modern era New Mexico, it's 95% defense against horrible bad policy, and sometimes it's legal or some other way to address issues. But I wouldn't have even put a global pandemic on my list of things to do in 2020, and yet here we are. And we were able to pivot very quickly, not just with fairlyopen.com, but in general, critiquing the way in which the governor has operated and the decisions that have been made, and it's pretty ugly out there. And New Mexico's been a pretty lockdown state from day one, but it hasn't done any better on the virus, or you can't point to any statistics saying, oh, New Mexico really did great on the virus. And we've tried to emphasize the economic aspects. And unfortunately, this governor, who does not share our outlook in any way, shape, or form, has pretty much ignored anybody calling to reopen the economy. And that's when virus rates were relatively low. Virus rates were higher in the summer, and then now things have gotten completely out of control. She's been very, very consistent in promoting a lockdown, actually not one size fits all, picking winners and losers mindset and way of doing things.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how much I needed to donate to her reelection campaign in order to be considered an essential employee. Well, I self-identify as an essential employee, Paul. I hope you second my motion. But
yes.
We were in the office today.
Yes. Cannot live without Patrick Brenner in the office. I mean that in the sense that, yes, we are the loyal opposition. We are the people who are calling BS, who are defending the rights of New Mexicans to do things that in their day-to-day lives that I would have never, ever in a million years. And with that, I'll just say, happy Thanksgiving. Madam Governor, if you're looking at this, please consider this my opposition to your approach on Thanksgiving and so many other things. And I never thought I would have to put something like that up and state it clearly. But I know, again, Patrick, a thing that we've talked about more in the last year or so, and again, this is partially due to a shift in the political dynamic in New Mexico, is on the gun rights issue. And just in general, you've been very good at getting timely emails out, but you've been following and tracking gun issues at the city of Albuquerque pretty closely. And talk about some of the work we did on that.
Well, to go along with your graphic, I think that we should amend the Second Amendment to include the right to keep and bear arms and turkeys.
All right. It was almost the national bird, Patrick. Ben Franklin was pushing hard, and maybe we wouldn't have been eating them if they were the national bird. I can't imagine sitting around. I mean, it'd be a federal offense to eat a bald eagle, but it probably wouldn't be very tasty either. So anyway, bear arms and turkeys. I like it.
Yes. So as far as tracking the Second Amendment issues, we have a number of board members that are diehard defendants of the Second Amendment, and I appreciate
Defenders,
that.
not defendants.
Sorry, defenders, excuse me, of the...
Not
of
yet,
the,
at least. Give the governor time.
Oh boy, challenge accepted. I hope she turned it off at this point. As far as the Second Amendment goes, Albuquerque has been aggressive and colorful in their interpretation of the Second Amendment and how things are handled. One thing that I know is that the state constitution identifies that no municipality or county shall regulate in any instance the right to keep and bear arms, which means that the city can't overrule the national Second Amendment, and no county can overrule the national Second Amendment or the people's right to keep and bear arms. And what Tim Keller has done is very creative. Props to him for his creativity and his legal department. And every town demands gun action and Moms Against whatever. I can't keep track of all the different names of the organizations as they go by. But rather than regulating an incident of the right to keep and bear arms, he's creating school zones. So he's taking city parks and he's calling them schools. And that's funny now because there's no schools that are actually in session anymore. But by calling a city park a school, you can't carry firearms on school premises. That's a big no-no. And all the concealed carry people that I speak with and all the open carry people, gun owners are the most law-abiding citizens out there. And I speak both from experience, and there are some figures and facts out there that support this claim, but gun owners are very law-abiding citizens. So when Mr. Mayor Keller goes out and regulates not the incidents of the right to keep and bear arms, but rather creates a school zone at a city park, of course we're going to follow it because no responsible gun owner is going to utilize a city park if it's a school zone. So rather than do that, we just don't use city parks at all, which is what created a opportunity for litigation. My mom is the plaintiff on a suit with the city of Albuquerque on this very issue, Lisa Brenner. Hi, Mom. She is the plaintiff with her attorney, Blair Dunn, and a group of patriots. I can't remember the name of the group at this point, but she can't use any of the city facilities because they've sidestepped the typical process by which you litigate some of these things or create rules for some of these things. So none of the city facilities are available for her use anymore because she doesn't feel safe in Albuquerque. I don't either. I carry everywhere I can. And she's not able to use these facilities now because they've essentially banned people like her and me from using them because we carry guns and guns aren't allowed. So I can't use community centers. I can't use city parks. Thank you very much, Mayor Keller.
Well, I guess the good news is that nobody else can use community centers or parks, at least.
Oh, Sue, it's fair. It's fair. Nobody can use them.
They haven't been for a while now because of COVID, but so that is another lawsuit that is a work in progress, right?
And we're not directly affiliated with that. It
But
just
we did leverage our membership to actively engage with City Council on several other proposed bills that amazingly, despite the very progressive City Council that we've now got in place, they rejected those, and not just on 5-4 votes, but it was often on 6-3 votes, and that was a good bit of information. Now,
I'm glad you mentioned that because we're now in a place as the foundation as a holistic view. We're in a place where we're encouraging more grassroots engagement from our donors and our supporters, where we will ask our membership to send in emails to the city of Albuquerque's city council or to Bernalillo's county commission or even Las Cruces. We had some issues going on in Las Cruces where we asked our local membership to engage directly with their elected officials. And that's something that we have certainly pivoted on, especially since the pandemic started, as we've been asking for more help from our supporters and our donors at a grassroots level.
Yeah, and before I get to kind of the last issue to discuss, we did and do a number of in-person events. We normally had our speaker series. We had one smaller event. We don't normally do much during the legislative session and around it because it's just organizationally taxing to have a session and potentially unforeseen events happen during that time frame. So we like to do our events after the session. Normally that's not a problem, but pretty much after the session got done in mid to late February, COVID kicked off, and so we missed out on not just the four major speaking events, but also Liberty on the Rocks was on hiatus for 3 months, I believe. April, May, and June. Although you literally were in Las Cruces doing a Liberty on the Rocks event the day when it was March 11th, the day when the state really started to shut down due to the COVID situation. So,
Right. I was tuned into KKOB and I was listening to her announcement live as she was starting to crack down and announce closures. And I can't tell you the dismay I felt as I was driving down to Las Cruces, hoping that somebody would actually show up at this event.
right.
But we had a fairly decently attended event, and then I drove back up to Albuquerque, and then Liberty on the Rocks was it until we were able to find a good place to do them again starting in July.
Yeah, in addition to Liberty on the Rocks, which is a no-host happy hour event, and we can, you can talk about the attendance numbers if you're inclined, or kind of the upsurge in interest we had in that. But we have had one other non-Albuquerque event here under COVID, which was in Roswell, and it's really been challenging to have events outside of the Albuquerque area. It's challenging enough to have events in the Albuquerque area where we both reside. So talk about Liberty on the Rocks and just the event situation and how challenging that's been.
Well, I appreciate our membership for being so flexible on all the different changes that we've had to really go with the flow on regarding last minute changes in venues because of miscommunications or last minute adjustments from the governor's rules and regulations that have been passed down. But some of the time with these events like Liberty on the Rocks, we've had to make same day changes, and we've had to hand out the oh boy, what do they call those? The secret bars from Prohibition.
Yeah,
Speakeasy. We've had to
speakeasies.
hand out speakeasy passwords and say, go park across the street at the Walgreens so nobody takes down your plate number. Um, and I mean, serious considerations like that. But despite all of those challenges, we've pivoted some of our events online. We had this Liberty Under Quarantine Zoom series with the Senate and statewide candidates. But we kicked off Liberty on the Rocks again in July, and that was probably our best attended Liberty on the Rocks ever. I think we had 70 something folks in attendance and a bunch of candidates too.
Yeah, and Liberty on the Rocks is something that's free and open to the public. We'll be kicking off again in January, we presume, although given the current lockdown order, you never know. It's just one of those things at this point. You don't know how things are going to develop. But yeah, we did that Liberty on Quarantine series of events, and Mark Ronchetti, Gavin Clarkson, and Elisa Martinez all participated in Zoom forums where basically I peppered them with questions about what they felt on the various issues, and hopefully it was not just useful for them, but it's something that folks out there got something out of in terms of finding out a little bit more about each of those respective candidates. And we'll just see if that kind of opportunity ever comes around again, or see if we're restricted from having more public events, because we want to inform and give the not just Rio Grande Foundation supporters and friends, but also the voters of the state of New Mexico as much information as we can about what people they're voting on are doing. We got, like I said, one more issue to talk about, but Patrick, I know you have several things that you prepared information on, and maybe some facts and figures that you wanted to share with the listeners.
Oh, sure. Well, as far as our mission goes, we're all about educating the public, and I'm glad that we brought up our Liberty Under Quarantine series, the Zoom event with the candidates, Liberty on the Rocks, our expansive direct mail program. We're all about educating voters about how their elected officials represent their constituents, and about the public policy problems that are plaguing our state. And I think that we're seeing overall a general upward trend on the number of people that we're impacting across the state of New Mexico. Our grassroots efforts are up. Our email subscribers are up. We've had a 20% increase in email subscribers over the last 18 months. That's huge.
And folks can go to riograndefoundation.org and be on the list, get on the list. They can also send us a donation. It is getting towards Giving Tuesday and year end. So either of those, both of those are welcome.
Yes. Sorry. Email traffic is up. Social media followers are up. I think we've seen 40% increase in social media followers across all of our platforms over the last 18 months. And that's pretty substantial, and it's all organic too. And our web traffic is up. We've done a good job of segregating out certain things. So Tipping Point, the podcast, is on a separate website. Errors of Enchantment, the blog, is on a separate website. And counting all of the different viewers of our different sites and platforms and educational resources that we have available to the public, I think we're up 25% overall over the last 18 months in terms of traffic. And that's pretty phenomenal. A lot of that, too, is in part from our partnership with Google. We have a new partnership with Google where they'll give us $10,000 every month in ad spending, which is an amazing program that we're pleased to be a part of. And we certainly use every penny of that to reach more and more New Mexicans every month.
Yeah. And real quick on our Twitter handle, it's Rio Grande FNDN, and that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Obviously, social media, since the pandemic kicked off, it's been a huge tool, even bigger than previously, simply because there's so much news, so much information coming at you, at us, and so much of it's so timely. Like, I've joked with Wally before. Can I take my kids bowling this weekend? Well, let me go online and find out what the governor's latest pronouncements are about bowling alleys and who can bowl in them. So, social media and just the online presence has taken on such a huge importance nowadays.
Absolutely.
So continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. But.
No, that's okay. So our social media traffic is up. Our web traffic is up. Our donors are seeing us more. Our supporters are seeing us more wherever they go. We're even reaching out using traditional direct mail, as we talked about, more and more, and it's all resulting in some pretty amazing traffic, and we're out there more, and we're receiving tons of great feedback about it too.
And on that note, sorry to kind of jump into do one additional aspect of what we do is traditional earned media. We track that through a mechanism that helps us understand how we compare to other interest groups and other organizations. So we track ourselves so far this year with Voices for Children, New Mexico Business Coalition, Viante, and the Think New Mexico organization. Unfortunately, the stark reality is Voices for Children has huge ability to make inroads with their singular report, which is the Kids Count report. They get that done by the Annie Casey Foundation, and they are the kind of group that shepherds that report. And New Mexico is in 50th with children and all these very negative numbers. So that report, and it's actually a pretty good report. We've gone through it on this podcast. It is it's good information. And so Voices for Children has in recent years especially become the leading, unfortunately, in that realm voice. But the Rio Grande Foundation is there in number 2 in second place, exceeding all the other policy-driven organizations in the state. So we're looking to hopefully get back ahead of Voices for Children, but they are well-funded. They have a relatively sympathetic media, and they're terrible policy ideas all across the board, unfortunately. So,
Shots fired.
oh, we've been there, been there, done that. All right, Patrick, we've only got a couple minutes left. I know one of the areas that we've been working most notably on is mandatory paid sick leave. Yet again, it's like the movie that will not end.
It's a zombie apocalypse. They're back from the dead again.
We've sent out a number of emails, and folks need to get active and send. If they're on Facebook, they still have time. So, City Council's meeting, like literally this afternoon, to discuss this latest edition of mandatory paid sick leave. Rio Grande Foundation has been a prominent part of a coalition of business and free market oriented type organizations here in Albuquerque that's trying to right the ship. But boy, this just in the last election, we saw that Bernalillo County continues to move to the left, and we've got our work cut out for us, not just here in this county, but around the state of New Mexico. So hopefully we'll have better news about the policies that we're trying to engage in and influence in 2021 when we sit down next time. But it's not for lack of working and putting our resources to good use to try to change that debate and narrative.
Sure. Mandatory paid sick leave aside, I know we're down to the wire. I do want to talk about Giving Tuesday.
Please do.
And some other things that we have leading into the end of the year. We have a very generous donor that has offered to match, donation matching. So he's offered to match up to $25,000 in donations that the Rio Grande Foundation receives by the end of the year. In order to donate, I highly encourage you to go to donate.riograndefoundation.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization recognized by the IRS. When you make a donation, we'll send you a recognition receipt and letter that you can use in your tax preparation and planning. I like being able to tout that because there are some organizations in the state of New Mexico that do some public policy advocacy, but that are not 501c3s, and you don't get any tax incentives. So tax incentives are good, and we can offer you that if you donate by the end of the year. So tax planning, we have a $25,000 donor that's willing to match up to $25,000 by the end of the year. And I know times are tough, so we also have a monthly giving program where you sign up either the 9 Club or the 1912 Society, or you can give a regular amount on a recurring monthly basis. And that's an affordable way for you to support the Rio Grande Foundation regularly. And that really helps us be able to pinpoint budget. It helps us budget. When we have regular recurring monthly donations, it really helps us keep a handle on things like website maintenance, all that stuff. Anyway, Giving Tuesday is around the corner. Giving Tuesday is hard because everybody and every nonprofit on the planet is competing for the same dollars, which is why I'm grateful that our donor has offered to extend the $25,000 match to December 31st. So postmark your donations by December 31st. We'll make sure that counts towards that match, and we'll make sure to get you a letter and a receipt that allows you to write off your donations to the Rio Grande Foundation for tax year 2020, which is becomes more and more important as the weeks and the months go by, as 2020 has been a pretty hard year, and tax incentives can be incredibly helpful to a lot of folks out there.
Yeah, and if you last thing about donating, if you go to riograndefoundation.org website, you can find out how to donate to the foundation through all those Amazon purchases that we're making nowadays. There is a link you can click on that's the Amazon Smile program. It's right there at riograndefoundation.org. And when you click on that link and then use Amazon like you normally would, you'll get what we will get 0.5% of the price of eligible purchases to the Rio Grande Foundation donated to us. So it's another great way. Folks can support the Rio Grande Foundation and its efforts. Patrick, thank you very much for your time and all you do for Liberty and the Rio Grande Foundation. We will hope for better times ahead for the state of New Mexico and its economy, and we'll talk to you again soon. All right, folks, thanks for listening to this week's show. Make sure to get the latest edition of Tipping Point New Mexico by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can post or comment on this and other episodes on Facebook and Twitter, and tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.